Hi, and welcome to this GCSE English lesson on descriptive writing. So in this session, we are going to have a look at the techniques that are used in descriptive writing. We are then going to analyse a piece of descriptive writing to try and pull out the techniques that the author has used in the piece. And then there is an accompanying worksheet with this lesson where you can have a go at writing your own piece of descriptive writing. And they are both exam questions in the worksheet, so you can have a look at the kind of thing you could be asked to write if you were given a piece of descriptive writing. So how do we write descriptively? Well, as with all other types of writing, there are a number of techniques that tend to be used in descriptive writing. Now, these are not exhaustive, and there are plenty of other techniques you can use. These are the most common ones that tend to appear. So the first one is similes. Now, hopefully you are familiar with similes. This is when we describe something as being like or as something. So it's a comparison. So you might say the bulb was as bright as the sun. And that would be an example of a simile. What often gets confused with similes is metaphors. Now, metaphors are also used in descriptive writing, and that's when you name something as something else. So you might say the commotion was a magnet for the children. It's not actually, but we're describing it as that so that we can conjure up a picture in the reader's mind. So similes and metaphors are both really useful techniques in descriptive writing. The next one you might be less familiar with, this is something called hyperbole, which is where we use obvious exaggeration for rhetorical effect. So you're getting the reader to think by overly exaggerating what's happening. For example, the sun was scorching hot. Well, it isn't, because it isn't probably setting fire to things, but by using that term and exaggerating how hot the sun is, you're really conjuring up that image in the reader's mind as to how the sun is behaving. So hyperbole, use of exaggeration. Personification. Now, personification, we do almost inherently as human beings. This is when we attribute human features to an object, to something that evidently doesn't have human features. So, for example, you might say that the tree danced in the wind. Well, trees aren't actually dancing, it's just moving about in the wind, but you're using that human feature to describe the motion of the trees and really make it clear to the reader. So personification is really powerful, and I bet you do it all the time. Pathetic fallacy is an advance on personification, a specific type of personification where we give deeper, meaningful emotions to something that evidently doesn't have them, an object or a setting. So you might say the deep, darkening, melancholic clouds hung over the day. Well, the clouds themselves aren't melancholic. They aren't sad. They're not depressed, but we're using that personification of attributing those emotions to really conjure up an image. And at the end of the day, that is what descriptive writing is all about. It's making the reader imagine the person or the scene or the setting that they are in. The next one is one of my absolute favourites, and one that nobody can ever seem to spell: onomatopoeia. Onomatopoeia, great word. Onomatopoeia is words that sound like the thing they're describing. And there are loads of these: crack, crackle, crunch, bang, sizzle. All great examples of onomatopoeia. So pause the video. Can you think of an example of onomatopoeia? And if you can think of some, say them out loud right now. They're good to say, right? They're the words that really, because they're all about sound, they're the words that we want to be said out loud in our writing. Excellent stuff. The next one is an oxymoron, a phrase that is contradictory. So, for example, a classic example, deafening silence. Deafening silence is an oxymoron. You can't have a silence that is deafening. It's physically not possible. It's a contradictory term, but it has a really powerful effect. Have a think if you can think of another oxymoron. Next up is emotive language. So this is language that's intended to create an emotional response in your reader, something that really either tugs at their heartstrings or helps them to identify the emotion within the scene. Now, this is particularly useful if you're describing something that's got a powerful emotion in it that you're trying to convey to your reader. So, for example, you might go for, they were heartbroken, ruined, crushed by the devastation and destruction that they witnessed around them. You're trying to over dramatize it, really ham it up, give them that emotive language to make them understand what's happening in the scene. And the final thing is the senses. Now, everyone seems to forget the other senses that aren't sight when they're writing. And our other senses are so powerful. So when we're writing descriptively, think about what you can hear, what you can see, what you can smell. Is your character, can they taste anything? Especially if they're in a scenario where there's a pungent smell or something where they might even be able to, taste the salt of the sea in the air. Think about the taste and think about touch. Think about, is your character picking up anything? Can they feel anything with their sense of touch? So including the senses really helps to bring the full image to our reader and bring the situation or the scenario alive. So there is a worksheet on the, there's a link in the bio for a worksheet that includes all these techniques and an opportunity for you to identify some examples of them, which you could turn into a revision poster. But we're now going to have a look at how these are used in a piece of descriptive writing. So I have a piece of descriptive writing for us to analyse. So please feel free to pause the video and have a go yourself at identifying the descriptive techniques used in this piece of writing. I'm now going to go through some. Again, this list is not exhaustive. This is just a few that I've identified. You might find other ones, and that is absolutely fine. So we might in an exam get a question that asks us to analyse a piece of descriptive writing and think about how the author has used language and descriptive techniques to portray the scene for their reader. So in this extract, though, Gerald Durrell is describing some baby hedgehogs that he's looking after. So some of the techniques that Gerald Durrell has used, for example, like a strange prickly centipede. What would that be an example of? If you said simile, excellent stuff. That is a simile. A chorus of shrill screams. A chorus of shrill screams. That is personification. We're attributing screaming like a human, in fact, screaming like something that has a really high-pitched scream like a child, to the hedgehogs. We've got emotive language, waving desperately. We've got like 4 survivors from a raft. Again, another simile. Flung themselves. We could say that's personification, because that's a very human thing to do. Curious swimming motion and tummies dragging on the ground. Again, we're attributing human movements and human features to these hedgehogs to describe how they look and how they're moving. Daring excursions. That's a great one. We might even claim that's hyperbole because we're exaggerating the excursions of 15 centimetres away from their box, which I suppose for a baby hedgehog is quite daring. So those are just a few of the techniques. You can probably pick out more. And what we would want to do in an exam question is pick out a few techniques and phrases that we could talk about and how they help the author to conjure up the image in this scene. They help us to imagine the baby hedgehogs, what it's like, how they act, how they behave, how they interact with one another. And we could talk about that in our answer. So I hope that made sense. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the box below. But otherwise, thank you guys for watching, and I will hopefully see you next time.